of the ego. Aham, I want it, I want it, I want it. Everything is there. Until we learn to say you, we have not developed at all. Absolutely raw ego in all of us. So when this little I expands, it finds its oneness with everybody else. Then I will never say everything belongs to me only. We will learn to say we in place of I. That's a tremendous development in every human being. So today we study this ego within man. This is a remarkable datum which has been thrown up in evolution only at the stage of man. In animals, there is no ego. The chimpanzee has no ego. No thing, being in the world other than man has this ego. It's a wonderful new datum. Modern science did not worry about the subject till now. It was worried about the world outside, penetrate into it, try to get the energy hidden there, and make for a better civilization. That's all what they were thinking. Now as thought has advanced, the center of study has become man. And in man, that profound datum, the ego, the little I, what does it mean? It was not there in any animal. It's not there even in a newborn baby. After about 2 to 2.5 years, you find the child can say, I want this, I want this. Till then it will say, this wants it, this wants it. The word this will remain. But the time comes, a little manifestation of this ego appears in man. A profound datum, that being realized today by neurology in the West, as we had realized long ago in the Vedanta, the significance of that little focus called I. In neurology we treat it as initial datum. It's not a final state, just beginning, just like a small sprout has come. That's called this ego. It has to go a long way in development. That is the whole subject of Jnana Marga, development of Atma-Jnana, and all the teaching of the Gita coming out of it. Therefore, this subject has to be treated as a profound subject. And I'm glad to find for the last 60, 70 years, in the West, they have been turning their attention to this wonderful subject of the ego, what is in man. In the study of modern biology, especially the philosophical implications of modern biology, the book is called The Science of Life, written over 1920s or so by H.G. Wells, E.P. Wells, and Julian Huxley. You find a wonderful passage dealing with this status of the I in evolution. There they say, alone and in the silence of the night, and on a score of thoughtful occasions, we have demanded that can this I, which is so central to my universe, which is so possessive of the world, ever cease to be? And yet, every night, when we go to sleep, this ego disappears, and we do not know by what stages it comes to an awareness of its own existence next day. Then the authors continue. Personality centered in the ego may be one of nature's devices. Remember the language, may be one of nature's devices, a convenient provisional delusion of considerable strategic value in evolution. Ego has a strategic value in evolution. It is a provisional delusion. Don't treat it as a final state. You have to develop it. You have to expand it. Some great work has to be done. That is the work that the Upanishads did ages ago. Handling this I. How to make it grow into its own true dimension. What is now the ego within us is a very small bit, a promise of big things to come. That philosophy has to be kept in view when we handle this great slogan. Karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu gadachana ma karmaphala hetubhuhu ma te sangostu akarmani. If I am satisfied to stay at the level of this little ego which has just sprouted in me, and I don't care at all to make it grow, then this slogan has no meaning. But if we want to see the further extensions and advancement of this ego, what are the new dimensions that will come, then this slogan becomes the opening of a gate to the highest development of man. And so we have to ask this question, what is this ego that appears in me? I possess the world through this ego. I am the center of the world. That's what we all feel. Even a child, when the ego develops in it, he becomes the center of the world. All those are dancing around that child. Very soon the child has to change that attitude. Find a place for others also. But the ego has to expand, to grow. The whole philosophy of this ego development, expansion into its own infinite dimension. That is what is called Vedanta. In no other part of the world was this subject so thoroughly discussed, so thoroughly studied and expounded, and we are glad to find great neurologists and physicists today handling this subject almost on identical lines, slowly going closer and closer to what Vedanta had said about this little ego within us, treating it as an initial datum, just like a rock. On the water, a little bit of a rock you find, and the child will say, that little rock is there. The father will say, it's a big rock. Much of it is underwater. Only a little is above the water level. Similarly, to the sensory vision of man, ego is a tiny entity. But if you know its depth, it's something infinite. That is the great teaching Upanishads give. In that light only, we can understand this verse and many other verses coming hereafter, where we have the Chandogya teaching, Tat-Tvamasi, Tat-Tvamasi. You are that. You are that. You are not this tiny little ego. You are not this tiny little self which you consider yourself to be. You are that infinite one. Tat-Tvamasi, Tat-Tvamasi is a profound teaching of the Upanishads, which is attracting the minds of biologists and physicists in the Western world, because it's the truth about man. We never knew it. So when you keep this background, then study this verse, a new meaning comes. I don't want to live at this initial level. Just like a baby doesn't want to remain a baby. He wants to grow. Similarly, the ego is like a baby. Why should I remain always as a baby? Some of the egoistic people's language will be baby's language. You can find it in your own society. A baby's language is I. So also many big people, they also talk I all the time. They do not know the extent of their own wonderful self. They know it only as tiny initial datum. They never understood anything further. And it creates great tension, great suffering for oneself as well as for others. So there is need for probing into the infinite dimension of the little ego that appears to us at the age of 2.5 onwards. That is the subject of Atma-jnana, Adhyatma Vidya, based on which Krishna is expounding philosophy of life and action for every human being. We shall take up the subject next Sunday as usual. There will be. Last Sunday we were studying the very important verse of the second chapter, which speaks of how we should work in society. In fact, the whole Gita is dealing with work. It is centered in work. Unlike in other books, man-centered in meditation, centered in worship, centered in some ritual or ceremony. But in this book, man-centered in work, the work-centered individual. Krishna is teaching such people, and they are the majority in the world, the philosophy of work. And so he had said in this verse 47, Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu gadachana ma karmaphala hetarthoho ma te sangos tvakarmani. To work, you have the right. That is the first proposition. Second, not to the fruits thereof. You have no exclusive rights for the fruits of your work. Then the third proposition, ma karmaphala hetarthoho. Let not the fruit of action be the motivation for your work. And the fourth proposition, ma te sangostu akarmani. Don't be attached to inaction also. If action doesn't produce results for me, why should I work? Let me keep quiet. Don't do so. These are the four propositions. So last Sunday, while expounding this very difficult verse, you can always question, every student will question, if I don't get the fruits of my work, what's the use of work? We always ask that question. It is good to ask that question and try to find the answer. So last Sunday, I referred to the status of the ego in evolution, quoting from The Science of Life by G.P. Wells and Julian Huxley, written about 60 years ago, a bulky book. Towards the end of the book, dealing with modern biology, there is a section dealing with the philosophical implications of modern biology. I quoted from that section, dealing with the unreality of the ego. Remember that word. This ego in man, what I call the self, may be one of nature's devices. I am quoting, at least in this case, the exact sentence. Sometimes books read 50, 60 years ago, we will not be able to quote exactly. But I remember about 3 or 4 Sundays ago, I referred to a particular line in English poetry. Our hearts are beating funeral marches to the grave. And I said, it is from Gray's Elegy. Sorry, it is not from Gray's Elegy. It is from Longfellow's poem, The Psalm of Life. Small such slips will come when you deal with books read long ago. But the substance of the teaching is there. But in this case, I am giving the exact sentence that this ego in man may be one of nature's devices. You have nowhere else in the world you find this ego. In the whole cosmos you don't find the ego. In the whole animal world you don't find the ego. Only in man you find it. So it may be one of nature's devices, a convenient provisional delusion of considerable strategic value in evolution. A provisional delusion. And we are basing our work on this provisional delusion. I. And the authors say, this I dies as soon as you go to sleep. What a powerful I it is. And yet, when you go to sleep, there is no I at all. Ramakrishna, in one of his beautiful sayings, he says, even the most powerful man, when he goes to sleep, if a child spits on his face, he is not there to protest. He is absolutely not there. That ego is gone. And then the authors say, this is similar to what we speak of detachment, objectivity. Suppose you want to know the truth of a thing, you have to remove this ego from the calculation. Ego will always wrongly judge a thing. You must detach yourself from the ego. Then only judgment is possible. Correct judgment. A judge in the court must banish his ego for the time being if he is to be correct in his judgment. So, any number of occasions in life, we are asked to set aside this ego because it is unreal, because that is not our true status. That is the main truth about it. But you can go beyond and understand what exactly is the root of this ego. What is it towards which it is going to develop? That is the infinite self. That Atman is one with all. The true self in man is one with all. You and I are one. When Jesus was asked, what is the teaching and the commandment? He said 2 things. Thou shalt love thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind. That is the first and the greatest commandment. And the second is like unto the first. And what is that? Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these 2 hang all the law and all the prophets. a beautiful summary of the spiritual and ethical dimensions of human life. Paul Deussen, German philosopher, speaking in Bombay in 1892 after his tour in India, a great scholar in Vedanta, he said, here is the statement, love thy neighbor as thyself. But why, if you ask? The Bible has not given the answer. The answer is in the Upanishads. You are your neighbor. You are one. There is only one infinite self pulsing in you, in me, in all, in this world. And therefore, from this genetically limited ego, which considers the whole world as planets round the sun which is itself, from this position, we shall have to advance, realize our true dimension. If you want to do so, then this detachment is absolutely essential. Detach from the ego. That's why this whole book is a teaching of detachment. It is a negative concept, but its positive content is by detaching from something lower, you are manifesting something higher. Gandhiji's book on Gita is called Anasakti Yoga, yoga of non-attachment. Non-attachment to not money, clothes, this and that. Non-attachment to this tiny ego centered in this organic system. Everything is its own, its own. This is not true actually in life. Even in family, a man works for whom? The wife or the husband or the children, for their welfare, not for his own. In every department you will find we are concerned with the society in which we live. We owe a debt to it. So everything is not our own. A social context of human behavior, human life. That's why we pay taxes. We get an ordered society, there's a government, it has a due from us, and we pay. Similarly, many other obligations are there in society. Everything is not one's own. When we understand this truth, we expand our concept of self. And that is the first thing we have to do. How to expand the concept of the self. The self that is tied up within this organic system is only a convenient provisional delusion. When you set it aside, you begin to expand your concept of self. You are also myself, you are also myself. So whatever I do, the fruits are not to be coming to me. It will go to all. And a state will come, there will be nothing of I left. Everything will be you, everything will be thou. We lose ourselves in the universal. And then the authors say, this is what mystical teachings have taught us all the time. The little self must be transcended. This is only a means, not an end. Similarly, modern biology teaches you forget yourself as Tom, Dick and Harry and realize yourself as man, Homo sapiens. That is your real identity, one with all the other Homo sapiens that are there. Now this is the correlation between the spiritual current here and the modern scientific current when you penetrate deeper into reality. In this light, we can understand a little more this enigmatic proposition, four-member proposition. To work you have the right, not the fruits thereof. Don't be running after the fruits and don't remain inactive. Man's tendency is, if I am not to get any result, why should I work? This tendency has become maximum in India, in our society. In spite of all the religiosity that we have, we are utter failures when it comes to social problem, social welfare. Public property is nobody's property. Public tap is nobody's tap. We are mostly concerned only with our own taps. We won't allow water to flow. But a tap in the street, I don't mind, because it's not mine. This kind of littleness of I has overwhelmed this nation. A little of this teaching will do us immense good. That there is a society around you. Its welfare is also your concern. Even to become a citizen of a nation, You must go beyond this little self. Everything is not your own. There are people around you. They need your work and service. When we realize this truth only, we become citizens. So Krishna said in the 3rd chapter, he who cooks only for himself, he eats only so much of sin. That's what he says. Bhunjate te tvaham papa ye pachanti atma karana. Those who cook and eat only for oneself, never thinking of others, they eat only so much of sin. This is a very strong statement in the 3rd chapter of the Gita, to which we shall come later. But in this context, this self is only a delusion, said Buddha. There is no separate self. Belief in a separate self, separate individuality, is the center of all evil. All selfishness, all violence, all exploitation come from that particular attitude. Therefore, when I realized my belongingness to a society, I can't attribute all the fruits of my work to myself. The word self becomes wider, wider, wider. That is the criterion of human development. A little baby will always say, I. He wants everybody to look to it. If he says something, you must listen, because he is the center. It is good for a baby, not good for a grown-up person. He has to respect other people, respond to other people, work for them, help them. There is so much of intercommunication in society. All this is based upon this one single teaching at the beginning of the 2nd chapter. Do work. Don't appropriate the results to yourself. There is a higher point of view from which you can do your work. That higher point of view must come to us today. In fact, as I said several times, that public sector undertakings will become a great success in India the day we understand the Gita teaching. What is not specifically mine, but belongs to all, I must take more care of it. That one lesson can transform our social situation. But it is just the opposite. Because it doesn't belong to me, it doesn't concern me, I am not interested in it. So public sector will be a failure so long as this character is not there. But when we learn this lesson, we will see tremendous development. No private sector can compare with public sector. Today the whole thing is opposite. In any country you go, government schools are the most efficient. In India it is just the opposite. Private schools are always efficient, government schools are always bad. Nobody cares. Therefore, this petty, selfish attitude to work has ruined the whole nation. I. The English saying is perfectly correct with respect to our history. I and mine, and the devil take the hindmost. So we did it, and all the devils came here. We have plenty of devils play in India of exploitation and suffering. We want to overcome that situation. So here comes a profound message, so deep. The more you go into it, the more you get meaning out of it. Though on the surface, it is enigmatic, even unsatisfactory. I do the work, somebody else will take the fruit. That's how we put it in a very crude way. But it is very deep. So, ma karma phala hetur bhuhu. Let not the fruits of your action be the motivation for your action. Ma te sangostu akarmani. Don't be devoted to inaction. Since I am not going to get anything, why should I work at all? Don't take that attitude also. The next sloka, 48, gives you the positive approach to the subject of work. If you ask me not to run after the fruits of action, that is negative. What shall be the attitude of my mind at the time of my action? That is the theme of verse 48. It's a beautiful verse. Yogastha kuru karmani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya siddhya siddhyo samo bhutva samatvam yoga uchyate. Here that word yoga comes once again. What is yoga? Samatvam is yoga. Equanimity. Keeping the mind in perfect balance. That's called yoga. Samatvam. Yoga uchyate. But then, what point of view I shall adopt during work and human relations? Yogastha kuru karmani. Do actions from the point of view of yoga. Established in yoga, do actions. That buddhi yoga, which had come earlier, that buddhi yoga is the attitude from which you can work and achieve most effective work. Yogastha kuru karmani. Sangam tetva. Giving up attachment. That attachment that comes from this little ego. All attachments come from that little man. That attachment has to go. But how does it go? When you deny this little man. When that little ego is removed, the larger self begins to manifest. Therefore, yogastha kuru karmani. Sangam tyatva. Dhananjaya. Siddhya siddhyo samo bhutva. Be even-minded in siddhi and asiddhi, success and failure. Too much of depression in failure, too much of elation in success is not proper. Therefore, try to keep the mind even. Siddhya siddhyo samo bhutva. I remember reading the Mahabharata, the story of a young prince of the northern Sindh region getting defeated in one or two battles, and he became depressed. If he had succeeded, he would have been very proud, but he was defeated, so he became depressed. The mother was a heroic woman, Vidula. Vidula was the name of the mother, Vidula. Son's name was Sanjaya, not the Gita, but another Sanjaya, was the king of northern Sindh. That mother, the heroic mother, told his son, don't remain depressed like this. Be manly, be strong. Failures come, success come. You should not deal with all of them. They are like waves in the sea. Constantly they will be there. You must be above them. And then she uttered a famous line. In a small number of words, so much meaning and power are compressed in that statement of Vidula. She said, looking at this boy, young prince, Muhurtam jvalitam shreyo, nata dhumaitam chiram. It is better you flame forth for one instant than smoke away for ages. For a language. Just a brief utterance. What a tremendous message for every human being. Muhurtam jvalitam shreyo, nata dhumaitam chiram. Go on smoking for ages. What fun is there? Flame for one instant, then disappear, doesn't matter. What a beautiful thing. The English poet Ben Jonson speaks of, in small proportions do we but beauty see, in short measures life may perfect be. A Shankaracharya of 32 years, what a wonderful light he was. Short but intense. And the effect even today we have of his life and work. So in this way, a very manly, heroic philosophy will contain all these elements. All those petty little attitudes of I and mine, I don't care for others, we have had enough of it in India. That heroic attitude must come today. Muhurtam jvalitam shreyo, nata dhumaitam chiram. So when he said, Yogastha kuru karmani, do actions from a particular level of consciousness. It's a big subject, this subject of level of consciousness. In the West today is a very, very attractive theme. How to raise our consciousness levels. After all, what is a man's action? From a particular consciousness level, that action comes. If there is another level, another action will come. A criminal has one action. His consciousness level is in a particular state. A very generous man also has action. His action comes from another consciousness level. And so this subject of raising consciousness levels, bodha unnamana, is a very attractive subject in all Western countries today. It should be so for our own country. If an officer or a clerk in secretariat is unconcerned with the people, his activity comes from a particular level of that little ego, that provisional delusion called the ego. He has no concern for others at all. As soon as you find another person interested in the people who come, what can I do for you? I want to help you. His action comes from another consciousness level. So that consciousness level from which positive actions come, positive good to society will come. That's called yoga level, yoga buddhi level. So yogastha kuru karmani. Do work from that vantage ground of yoga. Siddhya siddhyo samo bhutva. Be even-minded in siddhi and asiddhi. And then finally comes samatvam yoga uchyate. Yoga is equanimity, balance. That's the nature of yoga. Every experience throws the mind into a wave. Small wave, big wave. You have the power to control that wave formation. If you exercise that power, you are a free person. You are really using your higher cerebral system. If you don't, you become like a creature of circumstances. Somebody says you weep, and you weep. Somebody says you smile, you smile. You have no interest, you have no freedom in yourself. That should not be. I shall smile when I want to. Not because somebody dictates to me. Nature dictates to me. That's called freedom. The whole of this teaching is based upon human freedom. From freedom we come, in freedom we live, on the freedom we return. That is the Vedantic teaching, said Swami Vivekananda. And so here, the capacity to keep the mind in balance when so many circumstances come to unbalance it, that is the real test of human greatness, human strength. So many examples are there in this connection. From the highest level of a Buddha up to ordinary levels of greatness in our society, you find many types of this achievement. But every step that you take in that direction to show that you are free from external constraints is progress, human progress. That is to be emphasized again and again. Some time ago, I referred to modern neurology telling us about this thermostatic equilibrium within the body and similar other equilibria within the human system, like the constitution of the blood, etc. Everything is in balance. When it is upset by work, it automatically becomes in balance. That is the homeostatic condition of the human body. That is a wonderful achievement, not by you and me, but by nature, for the later mammals and for us, this kind of homeostasis. And there, the famous French physiologist had said, and I quoted it one of the earlier Sundays, that a fixed interior milieu is a condition for the free life. If you want to truly achieve freedom, you must try to establish a fixed interior milieu, not a milieu which is being made up and down by external forces. So to that extent, you are progressing towards your life's perfection. So a fixed interior milieu we have to establish. This is a very difficult subject, and so Grey-Walter, in his book, The Living Brain, Grey-Walter of England, there he discusses this subject in a very fascinating passage. He said, our teacher was Sir Joseph Barcroft in Cambridge. He used to lecture to us about the significance of homeostasis in evolution. And he had wonderful examples to give. And one such example he said, I'm quoting from Grey-Walter, the words of Sir Joseph Barcroft. How many times I have taken a boat and sailed on the lake and watched so many bubbles coming both sides of the boat, ripples, and they meet together, form a new pattern of ripple, and it's a wonderful thing to observe at the time. The various patterns formed by the various actions of the boat on the water. Then he says, but one condition must be fulfilled to make those patterns. The water must be perfectly calm. The lake must be perfectly calm. To expect high patterns in the stormy Atlantic is impossible. Similarly, to expect high intellectual development in a mind which has not achieved a measure of stability is simply impossible. So all intellectual growth, creative growth, and spiritual growth need this prior stabilization of the human psychic system. Samatvam yoga uchyate. That is yoga, which is based on this samatva, calmness, balance. Everything tries to unbalance me. There is a system in me which balances it automatically, as a body does it. So a physical homeostasis, which nature has given to you, must be complemented by a psychic homeostasis you gain for yourself by your own efforts. This inner homeostasis is what is meant by the two great words of our spiritual tradition, namely Shama and Dhamma. Shama is discipline of the mind. Dhamma is discipline of the senses. When Shama and Dhamma operate in me, then this Samatva becomes well established. Shama Dhamma. They are highly significant words in our spiritual tradition. Shama and Dhamma. So, Dhamma is this riotous sensory system is controlled and calm. And Shama is, the mind also is riotous because it is tied to the sensory system. That mind also made to be calm at a time. This becomes a natural state by constant practice of these two virtues. Then comes this achievement, samatvam. That is yoga. There is nothing particularly impossible, nothing magical, nothing mystical about it. Anybody can do it, anybody can achieve it here and now in the process of work. And one great lesson Vivekananda stresses again and again. It is the calm, steady person that turns out the largest quantum of work, not the excited, unsteady type of people. They may make noise. The work will be very poor. Calm, steady people, wonderful work they will do. This is what we have to learn. So, this is the great teaching Krishna giving us. Work, but the consciousness level from which your work proceeds must be of that nature. Stable, steady, that's called Buddhi Yoga. Yoga Buddhi. Buddhi established in yoga. That state is the best from which all actions can come. They'll be always good. They'll be good for all and good for oneself also. And therefore, these two virtues, Shama, Dhamma, they are highly praised in our literature. Great workers, great world movers, unless they had that samatvam within, they can't summon that tremendous energy to make the world move in that particular direction. And so for all of us, as much as we can, even one step ahead is good for us, for making our life efficient. And yoga is going to be defined later on in verse 48 as efficiency in life and work. So there is nothing magical. Our people must banish all idea of magic and miracle from this philosophy. This is down to earth. Take a man by the hand, slowly lift him up and take him to the highest level. That's what this philosophy does. Everything is clear. Everything can be communicated. It can be practiced. It is difficult. All great things are difficult. Even climbing a small hill is difficult. But the more difficult, the more will be the challenge to a great mind. I don't want easy life. That attitude must come. Then only you can have a nation of heroic minds. No easy life. I am prepared to pay the price and get it. No charity. That's a wonderful idea. In India, the Sikh gurus from Guru Nanak to Guru Gobind Singh, they were the people who taught this wonderful idea of self-reliance. Don't seek for easy life. Work hard. Don't beg. Work and earn. Nowhere in India you will find the command of that great teaching in the life of the people as you find in Punjab from these gurus. Even in the most difficult times of partition, refugees are coming absolutely empty pockets. Nobody will beg. Only asking for work. There you can see the tremendous energy coming out of this little discipline which the gurus give. So the whole nation stands to gain by applying even a little of this Gita teaching. And this Gita is inspiring thousands of people in all parts of the world. Only today I was reading our famous Priyas Kapra, Professor Kapra of Berkeley University, author of the famous book, Tao of Physics, telling an interviewer, I first got interest in Eastern thought by studying the Bhagavad-Gita. That put me on in this direction. So many are reading all over the world. So that after some decades, the effect of all this study and teaching and practice will be found in a better humanity, more pure, more compassionate, more intelligent, more efficient. The Yoga or the Gita sponsors all these virtues and graces in people in all parts of the world. And so, in this verse of number 48, Yogastha Kuru Karmani Sangam Tyaktva Dhananjaya Siddhya Siddhau Tamo Bhutva Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. It's a beautiful idea. Even at the age of 4 and 5, a child must be taught a little samatva. Children are generally excitable. There is no harm at their age, but they must be slowly initiated into this. Now try to calm your mind. Don't be excited all the time. That kind of thing, slowly, slowly. That means he is handling his own mind, not the world outside. That is meaning of Shama and Dama. The world outside, somebody says, you are a fool, and I become wretched, I become depressed. That man is dead and gone. But I am living a depressed life because somebody said me. That's what an American said. To put your peace of mind in somebody's pocket is the most unfortunate thing you can do. And so learn to put it in your own pocket. I shall determine how I react to any situation. That can come only when the mind has that balance. The balanced position, you can have any reaction you like to a human situation. So when Sir Joseph Barcroft said, if the sea is calm, if the lake is calm, the lake of the mind, then it will form wonderful ripple patterns in the inner life of man. Intellectual and spiritual development cannot be found in a milieu which has not been calmed and made even. So that is why if you want to become great as a person, you have to achieve all these things. You have to handle your mind. The first thing we have to do is to handle your mind. We rarely do handle our mind. We handle tools. But the biggest tool is the mind itself. We never handle it. We let it go in its own way. So Gita is going to give us that other teaching. Handle the tools, handle the mind also. The tool of all tools is the mind. Then something great will happen to you. So this is the first definition of yoga. Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. And 2 slokas later, you will find again just 50, verse 50.